On the 20th of October 2017, at a factory in Elizabeth, South Australia, the last car ever built in this country rolled off the production line. It was a Holden Commodore, a VF2 in slipstream blue. Around it stood workers who had spent decades building exactly this machine, many of them the second or third generation of their family to do so. By the end of that shift, 150 years of Australian manufacturing capability, the engineers, the tooling, the supply chains, the institutional knowledge that had taken generations to build was gone. Not restructured, not relocated, gone. And here is what nobody told you at the time. The decision that ended it was not made in Canberra. It was not made by the union. It was not made because the cars were not good enough. It was made in a boardroom in Detroit. And it was triggered by something that had begun 14 years earlier on the other side of the world, in a collapse that had nothing to do with Australia at all. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what Holden actually was, not what the advertisements told you, what it actually was. In 1948, when the first all-Australian Holden rolled out of Fisherman's Bend in Melbourne, it was not simply a car, it was physical proof that Australia could build things, complex things, world-class things. At its peak in the late 1970s, Holden employed over 20,000 people directly and supported an estimated 200,000 jobs across the supply chain. The steelworkers in Whyalla, the component manufacturers in Geelong, the electrical suppliers in Adelaide. 1 in 8 manufacturing jobs in this country connected back to Holden. The Commodore launched in 1978. It went on to become the best-selling car in Australia for 23 consecutive years. Not occasionally, not mostly. 23 consecutive years. That is not a car. That is a cultural institution. The Commodore versus Falcon war was not just a marketing rivalry. It was a genuine cultural divide. Holden families and Ford families. There were suburbs where you drove one or the other, and the choice said something about who you were. At the peak of that rivalry, Holden sold between 90,000 and 120,000 Commodores per year. And that loyalty was the only thing that made the economics work, because the fundamental problem with building cars in Australia had always been the same. The market was too small. Australia in 1980 had 15 million people. Germany had 60 million. The United States had 230 million. A global car manufacturer can absorb the fixed costs of a plant across millions of units. In Australia, those same costs had to be carried by a fraction of that volume. The business only worked because of two things: Australian buyers who chose Australian, and a government that kept imported cars expensive enough that choosing Australian made financial sense. And here's the detail that tells you everything. In 1988, the tariff on imported cars stood at 57.5%. That wall was all that stood between a competitive domestic industry and a price war Holden simply could not win. Between 1988 and 2000, successive governments, Labor and Coalition both, reduced that tariff from 57.5% to 15%. By 2015, it sat at 5%. Before that, smash the like button, subscribe to Aussie Car Expert, and let's break it down. Every economist in Canberra supported the reductions. The theory was clean. Free trade creates efficiency, competition drives innovation, consumers benefit from cheaper imports. And in a purely theoretical sense, they were correct. But here is what the theory did not account for. A domestic car industry is not just an industry, it is an ecosystem. The suppliers who make the brake components, the engineers who design the suspension geometry, the toolmakers who build the stamping dies, these are not skills you can import or reconstitute quickly. They take decades to develop. And when the economics of building cars in Australia became marginal, every one of those skills became at risk. Holden knew this. Ford knew it. Toyota, which had been building Camrys in Altona, Victoria, since 1978, knew it too. What all three companies had in common was a calculation. At some point, the cost of maintaining Australian operations would exceed what the Australian government was willing to subsidise. And the question was not whether that point would arrive. The question was when? That question was answered definitively in September 2008. In September 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed. Within weeks, the global financial system was in crisis. Car sales globally fell off a cliff. General Motors, Holden's parent company, headquartered in Detroit, was burning through cash at a rate that could not be sustained. In June 2009, GM filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was one of the largest corporate collapses in American history. The US Treasury became the company's majority shareholder, and the mandate handed to the new GM was clear: Cut everything that is not essential to core profitability. Restructure. Survive. Holden was not essential to GM's core profitability. It was a small operation at the bottom of the world in a market of 22 million people, requiring ongoing capital investment in a country where the dollar had appreciated dramatically and where manufacturing costs were among the highest on the planet. The Australian dollar hit parity with the US dollar in October 2010. For Holden, this was catastrophic. Every component, every machine, every piece of tooling priced in US dollars suddenly cost 40% more in Australian terms than it had in 2007. Not gradually, almost overnight. Holden went to Canberra. The number it put to the government was $150 million per year in assistance to remain viable, roughly equivalent to what Australia spends on road infrastructure in 4 days. The Gillard government provided the funding, and then the election happened. In December 2013, the incoming industry minister stood up in Parliament and questioned publicly whether automotive assistance was value for money. He effectively dared Holden to leave. Holden left, not 6 months later, not after a structured transition. The same afternoon, Holden's CEO announced that Australian manufacturing would cease in 2017. Toyota followed within weeks. Ford had already announced its closure the previous May. The Australian automotive industry, all of it, ended not with a slow decline, but with 3 press conferences held over the course of 1 year. The Productivity Commission estimated in 2014 that the total cost to the Australian economy of the automotive industry's closure, Holden, Toyota and Ford combined, would be between $3.9 billion and $5.4 billion in lost economic output. Annually. Not a one-time figure. Every year. Permanently. That is not a rounding error. That is a structural subtraction from the productive capacity of this country. But the economic number is not the real cost. The real cost is what you cannot put in a spreadsheet. When a car plant closes, it does not simply close. The engineers disperse. The toolmakers retire. The metallurgists take jobs in mining or move overseas. The institutional knowledge, how to form steel to a tolerance of 0.2 millimeters, how to sequence a weld line for 900 vehicles per shift, how to calibrate suspension geometry specifically for Australian roads, that knowledge does not sit in a document somewhere. It lives in people. And when those people leave, it leaves with them. Holden's Australian engineering division had solved problems that no other GM facility had solved. Specifically, how to build a genuinely high-performance rear-wheel drive vehicle on a budget that European and American manufacturers would have considered impossible. The HSV program, the Commodore SSV development, the work done at the Lang Lang Proving Ground, this was not the output of a second-rate operation. These were world-class engineering programs producing world-class results. And here is what makes this so remarkable. The international automotive press knew it even when the domestic conversation had given up on Australian manufacturing entirely. When the VF2 Commodore SSV Redline was tested by international publications in 2016 and 2017, in the final months of its production, the reviews were not qualified with impressive for an Australian car. Car and Driver called it one of the finest driver's cars available at its price. Autocar agreed. These were not charity reviews. These were objective assessments of a genuinely exceptional machine. Australia was not building a car it could not compete with. It was building a car it could not afford to keep building. That is a different thing entirely. And it is a distinction that was almost never made honestly in the public debate about whether the industry deserved to survive. On October the 20th, 2017, the final shift at the Elizabeth plant began at 6 a.m., the last Commodore off the line. That Slipstream Blue VF2 was hand-assembled by workers selected by ballot, men and women who had given 30 years to that factory. Some of them had followed their fathers onto the floor. Their fathers had followed their fathers. The line stopped at 1:20 in the afternoon. Holden's CEO delivered a speech. There was a ceremony. A display vehicle was set aside for the National Museum of Australia. The right things were said, and then the gates closed. What happened next received almost no coverage. The Elizabeth plant, the same facility that had built the A9X Tirana that dominated Bathurst, the same floor that had produced Commodores that won the Bathurst 1011 times, the same address where Australian car manufacturing had been centred for 4 decades, was demolished. Not repurposed, not converted, demolished. The land is now a logistics park. So here is the answer to the question in the title. Australia's greatest car was not killed by the market. It was not killed by consumer indifference or quality failure or technological irrelevance. It was killed by a tariff policy that removed protection before the industry could adapt, by a corporate bankruptcy in Detroit that reclassified a profitable operation as a non-core liability, and by a single ministerial statement in a press conference that took less time to deliver than it takes to drive from Elizabeth to the Adelaide CBD. 3 causes, 14 years, and one final shift in October 2017. If that makes you angry, it should. Because the question was never whether Holden was worth $150 million a year. The question was whether $150 million was worth what we were about to lose. And nobody in Canberra asked it seriously until after the answer no longer mattered. If you got something out of this, hit subscribe. Every week on Aussie Car Expert, we go deep on the cars, the decisions, and the moments that defined Australian automotive history. The ones that deserve more than a paragraph in a newspaper. Drop a comment below. Should the government have paid to keep Holden alive? $150 million a year versus the $5 billion annual hole it left in the economy. Was it worth it? Or was the industry already too far gone to save by 2013? I want to hear it.